She's still laughing.
That's so funny. Welcome to Five Lemons Left. We're the real stuff, the lemons making lemonade. So pucker up, because we're going to be discussing our life's lessons and the nitty-gritty details of our spiritual journeys.
Hey y'all, I'm Amanda.
And I'm Drusilla.
I'm Melissa.
Hello, this is Morgan.
And I'm Penny. Welcome to our podcast today. OMG. Welcome everyone to episode 85 of Five Lemons Laughing. We are a full house again today. We just love it when we can all be together. We've gotten some feedback that our listeners love it when all five of us are here. That's awesome. And today we're going to build on our last episode where we talked about our values and we defined what our values are. And we started discussing like how our values show up in our life. And maybe there's times when, you know, we're out of alignment with our values. So we have to make some changes in our life. And so we wanted to expand on that today and to really take a deep dive into how to truly live your values and what shows up in your life when you are or you aren't living your values. Like, do your friends share your values? Do you have freedom in all your relationships to be unapologetically who you are or not? And so that's what we'd like to discuss today. And I would love to hear from the other four Lemonettes on what they see as, how to live their values in their life.
Lovely introduction, Penny. Thank you. I think one thing that happens in life is that we're all constantly changing, evolving, growing, or regressing, depending on your choice. And there's a quote that I've shared on here before that's so moving, but it's like, to love someone is to attend 1,000 funerals of the person they used to be. And
I love that.
It's so profound and it's so true. Like, we are meant to change. We are not meant to stagnate. And are the people in your life coming along on that journey with you, or are they boxing you into the person that you used to be? And I think that is a natural process that everyone experiences. And it is going to just happen unconsciously and painfully if you're not aware that that process is constantly unfolding. So I think that's kind of what we're examining here today, in a sense.
I just thought about something that you mentioned, Penny, in the last episode about going to a reunion and kind of reassuring yourself about how glad you are that you only see some of those people every 5 years. I just thought about there's a couple of people in my close circle from high school that when I am around them, that I feel my old values creeping in. When you describe that about boxing yourself into your old beliefs and values, Morgan, when you mentioned that, I just had this strong feeling of being around a couple of people from high school and what that feels like, that smothering feeling of, restriction and contracting back into the box of that person that I used to be. Yeah, so I like that description.
Yeah, and I think when you only see people, well, I see some of them more than every 5 years, but they don't get to really know who I am. And they don't really see maybe the changes I've made. Maybe they do, maybe I don't. I could be making a lot of shit up right now. But I think that like, we're so lucky. The five of us have been together for several years, and we've been able to witness our opportunities to grow and change and to see the impact it has on even our relationships together, which is really beautiful. and we're open to it. We're open to being there for each other because we know we're all on this spiritual journey, right? And so, yeah, I just wanted to say that.
And I just had this feeling about this in a way that made me sad. And maybe it's because of the funeral that you just talked about, Morgan. When
The 1,000 funerals.
Yes, one of my funerals that a few of my funerals that my family members haven't had the chance to attend because of what Penny just explained. They're not quite aware of a lot of the changes and commitments I've made to myself as an individual. So I can't say that I'm always showing up 100%, authentic, even with my family and even with the most positive aspects of myself and my growth, because I don't want to show up as if I think I'm better or different, or, hey, I'm awakening and you are not, and there is that part of me that feels like I should be cognizant of how I am presenting myself to my family. And that is sad to me.
Mm-hmm.
That is sad to me.
It is sad. And it makes a lot of sense, right? Because I can remember like going back and forth. So I spent half the year with my mom, half the year with my dad. And this was since from the age of 3 years old. So I had to get really good at switching my personalities because my mom's household was completely different than my dad's. And it was protection when you were talking, Drusilla, it's protection. It's protection. It's nothing else. For me, when I started making change, like I didn't want to reveal my whole self because I didn't want to be criticized. I didn't want someone to put me down. It was a big deal. And when I started on my spiritual journey, it was so tender. It was like a little itty bitty baby that you had to protect, right? I didn't want to expose it to anything that would alter my path at all. It was definitely the hidden room. I don't know who talks about that. I think it's in the Bible. Where it talks about go to your secret spot.
I thought it was your happy place. Not your happy place.
I was just remembering the last time you tried to recall a quote from the Bible.
I'm so right. Yeah. And I did look that quote up and it was nothing like I thought it was. So I'm going to have to Google that. I think maybe, or was it Emmett Fox that talks about, it doesn't matter. I'm going to Google it.
Well, the point that you're making, Amanda, that I'm hearing you make is that in order to be, well, for me, to be unapologetically who I am in all situations, I have to feel safe.
Yes.
And what I heard you saying is that you didn't feel safe growing up in the homes you were in at times. And I can totally resonate with that because there was a lot of chaos and disorder and dysfunction in my home. And so it's taken me a lot of years to, well, first to identify what my values are, and then to start living towards them, and to be okay when they aren't in alignment with other people that are important in my life. Because that happens. Yeah.
And then I established a habit of hiding early. So it is hard to be vulnerable, right? To really show up authentically, right? Because when you show up 100% authentic, that is vulnerability.
And there's risk involved.
There's huge risk involved.
Yeah. And we've watched you blow up that vulnerability. Can't be vulnerable in front of us. We watched you do that, Amanda. That's just been beautiful.
Yeah. And I love that thinking about this in the filter of friendships, Like, who actually can I be vulnerable in front of? Right? I don't know. Like, that's just something to think about. I'm going to have to ponder that as this goes on. Is there anyone in my life right now that I couldn't be vulnerable in front of?
I think too, Amanda, that has taken a while for all of us. I mean, may I just speak for myself? Like, just as I was entering, kind of getting comfortable with my spiritual evolution or process, I don't think I was in a place to be vulnerable with people. Maybe outside of like my therapist, a coach or something like that. Like I had little safe places, but I just couldn't. That's not a start. That wasn't a starting place. That is a place that you get to. And I think that like you said, like through the filter of friendships, I built a lot of friendships with mothers of kids that I parented with. And so now all of our kids are in college, and we have different values. And so I'm just learning to accept that, like just accept it without having to change them. And some of them, I think like the word rejection comes up, like certain things I just wouldn't talk to them about. So I would prefer to talk to the world on a podcast. Everyone.
Yes. Exactly. I felt in this discussion, it's like, wow, I can sit here and do this, but can I, in every aspect of my life, always show up authentically? And there's still some areas where I would feel too vulnerable.
Yes.
Well, when I was at that school reunion, I didn't share anything about doing a podcast. I didn't share anything about my spiritual journey. I didn't share, and quite honestly, nobody asked.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry, Penny.
Yeah, it's really interesting. It's really interesting. I'm always asking questions about like, how's your life? What are you up to? And so many people just don't do that, at least from my hometown. They don't. And so, it was really, it was eye-opening, I'll say.
Yeah.
So you did not go to the hardware store for milk?
No, I didn't get any milk. I tried maybe a little bit.
I'm glad you said that, Melissa, though, because like, so this question that we're talking about is like, are you able to be unapologetically yourself, or do you show up differently for different people? And like, I think we all do that to some degree with different people. It's the hardware. You don't go to the hardware store to get milk thing that you just alluded to, Melissa, but it's also what is the why behind the reason you're choosing to show up differently, because it has shifted for me. Because I remember when I first really started out on my spiritual path as I know it today, like kind of more in this new thought direction, I had a lot of fear around showing up authentically around my family, who was and is still very immersed in the Protestant Christian church, Southern Baptist church, and those thought systems and beliefs. And I just had all these fears of they're going to think I'm crazy. They're going to think I'm going to go to hell. They're going to be like all these different fears about how they would see me if I just laid it all out on the table. And I have healed so much of that. And I share on public platforms like this podcast, on my social media pages and things like that. And I don't feel the need to shove it down their throat when I'm around them. I don't really talk about it when I'm around them, but I don't think of that as showing up inauthentically. You know what I mean? I don't feel the need. I'm not going to the hardware store to buy milk with them. Like, you know what I mean? Like, so I think a lot of it comes down to what's the why behind the reason you're showing up differently in each of your different relationships. Is it from fear, or is it from love and from, acceptance of where everyone else is in their journey? I don't know if that.
That makes complete sense.
And can you be in close relationship with people that aren't necessarily sharing your values?
Now, that's an even grander question, Melissa. So to my point, I do, because of what I stated a few minutes ago about not being able to show up in that way with family, there does seem to be a gap there that wasn't there before. And it's not uncomfortable, but it's just something that I am aware of.
Mm-hmm.
And it is because exactly of what you stated, Morgan, that I know that they're not aware of the growth specifically in the path and how I'm choosing to make decisions on a daily basis. So it's like, it's way too much to try to catch them up on, or for it even to expect for them to know, or to even want to know. Right. And so maybe it's not 1,000 funerals, but there's quite a few of them that they would have to understand and get over that I'm not that person anymore. And a specific example would be what I talked to you all about last year about the holidays and what I would normally do and what I decided not to do. Well, I didn't go and communicate that to them to help them understand why I was making those changes. I just acted differently and I did different things. But
so just to summarize, catch us up, for people who don't know what you're talking about. Maybe this is the first or second episode. So, because this speaks directly to what we're talking about, filtering friendships, values, right?
Yeah. So I came to a place where I started to feel that I was unappreciated for things that I was doing for the family. So I had to evaluate the whys about the things I was doing. For example, for any given holiday, especially Christmas and usually Labor Day weekend, we, meaning me and my husband, would host Christmas at our house for the last few years, which includes members of his family coming here and members being maybe 8 or 10 people who would stay in our home for at least maybe a week to 10 days. And then also having my family members come up maybe on Christmas Eve and staying to Christmas Day. And on Christmas Day, we might have anywhere from, 35, 40, 50 people here. And just taking all of that on and managing, planning, and all of that. And so I just came to terms with, I don't necessarily feel like I was doing it was it coming from a healthy place? And that's why I was feeling unappreciated about it, And so this past year, I decided not to do that, not to do it in my home. We actually ended up doing it at an Airbnb, and then just kind of letting everybody else take on a lot of the responsibilities. And yes, so I didn't specifically there's a couple of family members that I specifically talked to about it, but those are people that I do also talk to about my spiritual journey as well. I have a really large family. There was 10 children. My mom had 10 children. And then there's all these nieces and nephews. So there's a whole lot of people that know nothing, unless a few of them have listened to the podcast, that know nothing about all of this in between.
It's that dash, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
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 Well, thank you for sharing all that, Drusilla. I was contemplating the question that Melissa threw out and that Drusilla started with, can you be in close relationship with people if they don't share your values? And I was like, can you? And I was thinking about the values that we each shared on the last episode. And there was a little bit of overlap, but we all had different values. But they were all pointing towards a desire for self-realization, self-development, self-improvement. And so I don't think that we have to have the same exact values as everyone we're in relationship with, but are they striving towards becoming their highest and best self? Are they working on knowing themselves better and loving themselves? Or are they on a mission to self-sabotage and regress? Are they like stuck in ego? And you know what I mean? Like, I think that's
but Morgan,
really the only delineation.
But Morgan, I mean, so that sounds like a lot of judgment. And I think that when people are like in a different space than us, it's our ability to accept them exactly where they're at. And we might not go to dinner with them every night of the week, but maybe once a week or once a month. But so I don't think they necessarily have to be doing all of that you just mentioned to be in relationship with them. I mean, I think we might have to meter our time together, like, not be with them all the time. But I don't.
Where did you hear judgment in what I said, if I may ask?
Well, you were saying that, are they in self-improving? Are they coming from ego or not? Those were all, to me, that was all like you were taking their inventory, what they were doing to improve their life, where it's really none of my business what somebody else does with their life, because people get to live life the way they want to. And
they absolutely do. And like, I can just speak to my relationship with my husband, and we would not still be married if he was still on the same self-sabotaging path that he was on. It's not about judging him or not loving him. It's about loving myself and being true to my values. And so I don't know. I will respectfully disagree that there was judgment in that. But it speaks directly to the conversation we're having. Like, I think if you are living true to your values, then, and it also goes back to what we said. I don't remember if it was the last episode or this episode about having grace for people. And of course we have grace, and we accept people for exactly how they're showing up, not the potential that we see that they could one day be. And so how can I resolve this statement? I feel like I'm talking in circles right now.
Well, if I may chime in,
please.
A little of what I heard you say, that could be a little bit of an answer to what Penny said. It does have to do with proximity.
Mm-hmm.
Husband is your spouse. Mm-hmm. And in order for you to have a certain level of peace and to be able to live authentically every day, you have to have different boundaries than people that you're going to see. Like my family, I can make decisions about how often I see them and how much I'm going to interact with them. Yes. So proximity does have to do with it. But also to your point, Penny, and this was a part of what I was thinking coming into the episode as well, is I do feel like it is a part of my assignment to show up where there's a lack of growth, or what I might perceive as people who are still stuck in duality a lot more than they choose to be. Not my judgment, but people who seem to be suffering and who might tell you that they're suffering. And to show up in those places as, authentically as I can, to be the light is what I choose to do. But in the same vein, that does take me coming back to my safe place and building the muscle of being that person that I need to be, and not always being in the line of fire. because there's no way that I could continue to grow if I'm always in the line of fire and being triggered continuously.
That's a really good point, Drusilla. I'm glad you pointed out the proximity issue, because I wasn't, when I was talking about it, when I was listening to you, Morgan, I wasn't listening from a spouse filter. I was listening from a friend filter and or family member filter. And so we all get to decide what we can and cannot accept in life. And so obviously you and John Mark. God, I lost
you got
his middle name. You and John Mark obviously had a lot of deep conversations where you really hammered out what you could and could not accept. And then you either lived to them or not. And he decided to, and you both actually decided to live together in them. And I think that's a really big testament to your spiritual growth and John Mark's as well. And people get to live life the way they want to. And if we don't like it, we can move on. And marriages end, and friendships end, and family members fight, and they never talk again. It happens. And we just get to decide what we can or cannot live with.
Mm-hmm. And we can do that from a space of non-judgment, like coming back to that, like you can evaluate all of these things, which the word evaluation kind of automatically infers a certain amount of judgment. But if we think of it as not better than, less than, just preferences, like they're preferring to live this way, and being around that makes me feel icky, and I don't want to feel icky. So I'm going to have a preference to not spend as much time with this person while I bless them and send them love and allow them their free will and their freedom to choose to live in that way. So it can feel a little convoluted, because there is a certain amount of sifting and sorting, but with a level of neutrality and love, not judgment.
Mm-hmm. I like that.
I feel like I love a lot of people in my life who don't have the same values. I mean, they don't have, they're not mass murderers or anything like that. But I feel like I love them. I love them. I can choose to spend time with them or not. And I can choose to spend time with them and not try to change them. I can choose to just enjoy what they bring, or if there's something I'm not feeling good with, I can decide that I leave that situation. But there are people in my life who don't ask me a lot about myself, don't, like they're just on their own, they're doing their own thing. And it doesn't necessarily align with my life right now. And so I can just love them for who they are, right? I don't have to be everyone's best friend.
Exactly. Yes. Because that's the thing. The question was, can you be in close relationship with people who aren't sharing your values? Not can you love people who aren't sharing your values? Yes, we can love them. Would you marry those people? Would they be your best friend that you would call in time of crises?
I do have
it could be
getting smaller. Let's just say that. I mean, and that's why it's such a good question. Can you have a close relationship? So the closer that relationship is, I think the more aligned they would need to be with your values, because the incongruency of it would just be too overwhelming for you to deal with.
Very hard.
If I, for example, had to go and move in, or have my mother move into my home with me, then we might have some other conversations that we don't necessarily have to have right now, because I can just choose to live my life the way I want, and she will do the same, and we'll come in passing and have the beautiful relationship that we have right now, But I do think the closeness kind of dictates how much managing, which is not necessarily the best part, but how much managing you have to do in terms of making sure your boundaries are dictated by your values. And at some point, if they're not aligned, then there will be conflict.
Yes. Or you will let them be run over. You will, and then,
you'll let who be run over?
You'll let your boundaries get run over.
Just kidding. Right? I knew. Yes.
I love that you said that, because I was thinking safety, right? Like our close people that are close, right? They're safe with, right? That's who we can express authentically. And Penny, when you were describing, like, nobody asked you like what was going on in your life, that made me sad. Right. Mm-hmm. So like the people in my close circle, like if you're not inquiring about me, which kind of sounds egocentric, but if you don't care about me, that's going to be a filter for me. That's going to be a decision, right? Like I still may hang out with you and we might laugh and have fun, but you're not going to be in the core group of people that fill me up. Right? Like our listeners, I love our listeners, and they are getting the benefit of our close relationships, right? Because as we're talking, if you've never seen us on YouTube, like we are looking at each other right now. We care, we know we care about each other. So this close relationship, that's this community, that's what you're listening to. That's what to me, that's what ideal relationships are, if there's such thing as an ideal relationship.
That's
I think there is. Yeah.
So I have a question, and I don't know if we have time to really go into this deeply, but I'm just going to throw it out there. What if one of us or one of our listeners has a very close relationship, their closest relationship, their partner or their best friend or their parent or child or whatever, that does not feel aligned to their values? What does one do when they have that aha moment realization, like our values are not aligned?
I've been there with my husband. I definitely have. And I just had to keep the focus on myself. I had to keep healing myself, keep on my path. And I used to tell him, I'm getting on my train and I'm going. So you can either get on my train or the train is leaving the station. But I'm not sitting around anymore trying to get on your train. And for me, I just had to keep doing my work on myself. And I mean, he didn't have terrible values, but it just wasn't where, like, mine was just all spirituality and his was he's a rugby player. He's, like over there. And so, but now I think maybe it's our age or aging. I don't know what it is, but we're very much coming back together on our same values. But I couldn't do anything about him. I had to work on me.
So glad you made that point, Melissa.
Yeah.
Because that is the bottom line, is that no matter what else is going on out there, it's never about the out there. Right. And that's why I never made it about what my family, how they looked at me. I knew it was an inside job. And so I take full accountability for all the experiences. And it's and I feel confident enough and trusting enough in source that whatever falls away, it does so because it needs to fall away. And it's just as it's intended.
And it took you some time to get to that point, right? I mean, that just didn't happen overnight. Melissa, you weren't able to confront your husband with this overnight. I mean, this is a process. And it's a lot of trial and error and practice and making amends and then moving forward again and just deciding. It's, it may seem like we make it really easy here on this podcast, but you're seeing the accumulation of a lot of years and years and years of working on ourselves.
Tears
and tears and tears and maybe some yelling and screaming along the way. Yeah.
Ask that question again, Morgan.
If you are in a close, after, listening to this episode and kind of evaluating your values and your relationships, if you identify one of your core relationships is no longer aligned with your values, what do you do in that situation?
So the first step Melissa identified was do our self-work. Yeah. Safety is a big thing for me, clearly, because I've talked about it a lot, right? That's a huge one.
You started with vulnerability. That's how you started the whole episode.
Yeah. So safety would be a big thing for me. Like that would be a huge filter. If I was not safe in the relationship, I would start exploring other avenues, exit plans.
Yeah. And I'm glad you drilled down into that, because the self-work, the inner work that Drusilla and Melissa highlighted for sure, and safety. And then those two come together to self-love. Like, you got to love yourself enough to not put up with less than what you are worthy of. And I realized in my relationship with my spouse years ago, when things were at their worst, that tolerating what was not congruent with my values was not loving towards myself or him. So really a great starting point is to figure out where you're not loving yourself and why, and how can you correct that? How can you really learn to love yourself? Because just that simple act, not necessarily simple, but will inform your decisions and empower your decisions and help clarify that guidance that you'll be more inclined to have the strength and the clarity to make those higher choices and receive that guidance if you're coming from a place of self-love.
I'm so glad you said that. It's easy to say and hard to do. Filtering through all the layers and layers of stuff to get down to really loving self changes everything. It changes relationships.
It does.
And it's amazing how, for me, loving myself changed my relationship with my husband. Big time.
Yeah, I think that as we shift our energetic being, everything around us shifts as well. Or it doesn't. And then we just make a decision going forward. Yeah.
Well, as you learn,
aren't willing.
Exactly. And as you learn to love yourself, in my experience, your boundaries become clearer. I did not really understand how to create healthy boundaries with my husband before I learned to love myself. And then it was just duh, I should not tolerate this XYZ. It was just so obvious once I was really clear, I need to have unconditional love for him and who he is right now, not a future potential self. And I need to have unconditional love for myself. And then it was just lightning bolts. This is your boundary. This is what it is. And this is how you set it. And this is how you enforce it. And so, coming back to clarity comes through when you love yourself.
I'm so glad you explained that, Morgan, because it could easily have been mistaken when you described your decision in your marriage as almost like an ultimatum, almost, if he didn't stop doing. But the healing, a lot of times, and from my perspective, every time, the healing comes from you accepting him at that moment as he was, and that allowed him to heal So it's not just if he doesn't stop doing XYZ while I'm on my journey, then we're going to be done, because some people can see it that way. And it's not. It's about learning who you are. And like Morgan said, loving yourself enough that it becomes clear, and everybody's clear. He was clear about that you loved him unconditionally. So he wasn't repeating any of the habits. Oh, I'm going to have to prove my love. And then, oh, I know I'm never going to measure up. And then that becomes a cycle. So you were able to relieve him of that cycle. And so that's a whole different story.
Yeah. Thank you for that acknowledgement.
And I want to say, I think we're wrapping up here, but I didn't do any of this alone. I did it with therapists, coaches, spiritual coaches, mentors, teachers, friends who have been there before, and a lot of support. So if you are in that spot, you maybe you could do it alone. I don't know. I couldn't. I needed a lot of support to get me where I am today.
And that's how we all met, is through a community of like-minded people. Yeah.
Yeah.
You guys, it seems we're at the end of our time. And this seems like we're just scratching the surface, of loving boundaries, right?
Yeah. So I have a couple of Post-its to wrap us up.
Yay.
I just loved everything that was said, but boundaries are dictated by my values.
Yay.
That was one of the big things that we talked a lot about today. And then I love this. It was early on, and healing occurs. Healing has occurred when as we show up unapologetically ourselves, whether people in our lives realize it or not. Right?
That's true.
That's really when the healing it's occurred, even if they realize it or not. So, yeah, gosh, I'm just so grateful and thankful for you beautiful Lemonettes, and the wisdom and the experiences that you bring to our podcast really make it so full and so rich. And yeah, I mean, we could go on and have this going on 24 hours a day, but we know that people have to take a break. So we're going to take a break right now. We're going to wrap up episode 85, and we just love and appreciate you all. And just know that if you do need support on your journey, that every single one of us can support you in that. Go to our webpage and you can find our contact information, or get a support community around you. It really has made a huge difference in our life to have like-minded people who we can toss out things and unapologetically be who we really are, and not worry about the judgments and oh my God, they're going to go tell somebody about who we are. So just know that those communities exist and we're part of it. And we would love for you to come along with us. So thank you so much for listening today, and have a beautiful rest of your day.
Thank you. See you next week.
Yeah. Thanks for listening.